Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're having a fantastic day in what seems like a pretty quiet 24-hour period if you take into consideration the way that the previous 2 days have been. As of late, there's really not a ton going on around the scene, and there's a couple reasons for that, but I do believe that as soon as one domino falls, the rest will also continue to fall. I just feel like right now there's so many openings in certain places that they're waiting for a player or two. We'll talk about all that, but first, let's go ahead and let's get some of the biggest storylines of the past 24 hours out of the way, and then we'll dive into our graphic and really start to talk about who those players might be, where they might go, and once those decisions are made, how those decisions impact the other teams in the CDL. So again, it has been a pretty quiet 24-hour period per se, if you're talking about how things have gone over the last couple days. Major reason being is that August 29th deadline of yesterday is that teams had to have told their players by yesterday if they were extending their contract or if they were not. And this is the tweet from CDL Insight. We have referenced this tweet a couple times, but over the next few days, September 5th, which is now like 5 days away, is when players can officially sign their new contract. So we are in a bit of a holding period here. I'm not saying that there's no news that'll come out until September 5th. There's definitely going to be some news with who's teaming up with who and who's going where, but there's a few days left until that stuff probably makes its way to the public. Of course, if there is anything that comes out, you can guarantee that we'll be here breaking it down and showing how it impacts the scene and different players around the league. So we have a few days here until stuff actually becomes official and they put pen to paper. There have been some interesting tweets as of late, including this one from Envoy that has this gif from Michael Jordan, which says, "It became personal for me." And I think as soon as the news drops, I think at that point in time, sure, he's professional. He tweet scump, all love, formal, wishes that they could have ran it back and stuff like that. But deep down, after a day or two passes, I think when it comes to Envoy, he's really going to want to do everything he possibly can to kind of make up for the fact that he was dropped and maybe make Optic or whatever merger is going on there regret the decision for being him the one that they ended up letting go. So I think at this point in time, it's probably set in that he was the one that dropped, and now his main focus moving forward is trying to get back at Optic for giving up on him, essentially. Also, just a few other minor things is that first, DiamondCon is an unrestricted free agent. For me personally, I think he had a pretty solid year throughout Black Ops Cold War. I could definitely see him winding up on a squad. We'll see if that pans out, but he definitely played well enough, especially throughout Stage 5 when CLAYSTER stepped away. I do feel like he got a little bit of the short stick because since CLAYSTER stepped away and he went back to NYSL for Stage 5, he had to miss the amateur champs at that point in time, so the Challenger Series champs. But when it came time for the CDL champs, Clay then jumped back in and got into champs. So things didn't quite work out for him. He did get the short end of the stick. He had to miss both the Challengers champs and the CDL champs. But either way, I think he's probably good enough to find himself on a squad heading into next season. We'll see how that goes. And one that's probably a bit more expected is that John has removed LA Thieves from his bio. That is all but basically determined, right? The series that he had at champs dropping like a 0.6 KD, I think that he went something like negative 50 in the only series he played. That's just not going to get it done, especially when you're on the biggest stage. So unfortunately, I think John's time in competitive COD has probably come to an end. He did get that one last opportunity. Perhaps either the situation wasn't right or he just didn't make the most of it. But one other interesting note here, we talked yesterday and a little bit the day before about how we don't quite know what's going to happen with Paris, right? What is going on? Are they trying to sell their league spot? And then, of course, there was also the massive news about the HUKE and Envy merger. So if that happens, there's going to be another new name that is coming into the CDL. We thought that potentially EUnited could be that squad, as they were teasing a bunch of stuff across social media, had a webpage, yada, yada. And with this announcement from Halo Esports, it does seem like this is what EUnited was building up to. Yes, their CEO did come out and say maybe there was a little bit of bait there, but this is an opportunity for teams to get involved in another official esport. And if you look from top to bottom, there's some pretty big names here, right? You have Cloud9, you have Envy, you have EUnited, you have FaZe. Those are 4 massive names. Of course, if you look down at Sentinels, Sentinels is the roster that includes Snakebite, it includes Lethal, Royal 2, and Frosty. So those are 4 massive names. That's a huge name to have in this introductory period of Halo Esports. Of course, Fnatic, G2 Esports, and a couple others. So it does seem like there might not be a ton of them. There's only 9 total teams, but you'd rather have 9 solid teams that are committed to a Halo esport moving forward, at least for the first year or two, rather than open it up to 20 different squads and a year later, half of them are gone, right? So I like this move. The other thing that I'm interested about here is what happens with Envy. So Envy's the second team that's lifted here, but do they compete in the Halo Championship Series, in the HCS, as the Optic Gaming brand? If that merger does go through, you'd have to think that an Optic team in Halo would probably bring more viewership and garner more notoriety than an Envy squad was. I think that both of those teams are obviously massive brands, but I'm curious to see if they move forward in Halo under the Optic brand. And last but not least, this is just that announcement from EUnited that says, welcome to EUnited. And they have this graphic here with the Halo helmet with the EU on the visor. This will be their roster. So when it comes to EUnited, unfortunately, I think I was amongst the many that was really looking forward to them being back in Call of Duty. But it doesn't appear it's going to work out that way, and it is what it is. So news is out of the way. Let's go ahead. Let's bring up our graphic and talk about the domino pieces that I think have to fall in order for a slew of events to occur moving forward. So we touched on this maybe inadvertently yesterday in the video that I uploaded last night. But if we look at the squads that are here, again, just kind of previewing what exactly is in front of us, I think the top 4 squads are set here. I don't think Atlanta changes. There were thoughts that maybe Kleenex would go to Optic once Envoy left, but that obviously fell through with the news of the merger of Dallas and Optic. So that Optic squad, which is going to be the Dallas spot in the CDL, seems like it's going to be the 4 of them. And then still, I don't see Minnesota making any changes. I think there's a ton of teams that are probably trying to make something like this happen, right? How can we get Standy on our squad? But if I'm Minnesota, I am hanging on for dear life, and I'm making sure that doesn't happen. So there's one commonality that's missing between, for me, I think there's 3 teams that are right in the middle that need this key player, okay? If you look at Hydra, obviously he is not going anywhere. There has been no rumors or anything that Asim will not be a player that ends up sticking with New York. Again, kind of the same thing goes for Clay. There's nothing really saying that he won't be a player there, but they're 1,000% not going to give up on Hydra, right? That is a mainstay for New York. If you look at Florida, of course, Skies is that kind of central piece, that player for Florida. So Skies will be there. Again, nothing saying that Neptune and Awakening won't be there, but he is definitely going to make it happen there. And with LA Thieves, these are the 3 teams that I think need to add one key piece in order to really be assured of success in Call of Duty Vanguard. I think Octane's going to go there. The only piece that they're missing is another SMG. So for me, the dominoes are going to start to fall as soon as Envoy decides where exactly he's going to go. For me, he could join any of these three teams, and as soon as he does, it almost instantly makes them a contender. Maybe not for a title. I don't know if those teams can compete with Atlanta FaZe or with Toronto, and just kind of the mainstays and the team morale and the chemistry and the intangibles that those squads have built, even Minnesota and what they were able to do the latter half of the season. I don't know if at least immediately it makes them a contender, but let's see how these teams could be built out. So for example, one place that I think is absolutely a potential landing spot would be here with the New York Subliners. If Envoy ends up going to New York and he's partner alongside Asim, you could then potentially see the return of Clay, and all that they would be missing would be a flex. And if you add a top tier flex here with these three, I feel like this is a squad that you put them on paper against that Optic roster, against that Minnesota roster, against maybe even that Toronto roster, depending on how Cammy and Insight end up playing next year. This is absolutely a disgusting squad that can compete with those other top four squads. So that is definitely a potential landing spot. Another place for Envoy would be to partner up alongside Kenny and Octane and Draza here. Now, they don't quite have that prototypical super aggro SMG, right? If you look at the other top four squads, you have a BZ that puts a ton of pressure on the map. You have Kleenex, you have Shotzi, you have Standy, you have Hydra. This LA Thieves potential roster really doesn't have that person, even though Envoy is at least in 5v5 was thought of to maybe be in that mix. In 4v4, the rogue hero plays that he makes don't really work out. So they don't quite have that entry, at least that prototypical entry SMG, even though you guys would probably say, well, Envoy is that guy. But the rest of the players on this squad are super talented, especially the backbone of this potential LA Thieves team would be Kenny and Octane. You put those two together, that flex and AR role can immediately compete with every other team in the CDL outside of maybe Atlanta FaZe, but they're really just an anomaly, right? Atlanta is they basically have a prototypical powerhouse at all four positions. So I think that LA Thieves roster could probably compete with Toronto and Minnesota and the rumored Dallas squad, and who knows what happens with NYSL. And then I think this is probably, if I had to rank NYSL, LA Thieves, and Florida as potential landing spots for Envoy, I think Florida is probably the least likely, especially the way that the team is put together. But again, it does kind of work. Throughout the entirety of Black Ops Cold War, we saw the potential that Florida Mutineers do have. So for me, it has always started with Skies and Awakening. If they stay together, they obviously have the potential to be a fantastic duo. They have shown that even in matches against, for example, the Minnesota Rocker last year. It wasn't until the very end of the season that Minnesota was actually able to beat them because they could not get over the hurdle at main AR and at flex. So it starts with the two of them. If Neptune does end up staying, then that's another piece. Neptune is not quite on the level of the Abizis, the Shotzis, the Standys, but he does show at times that he has the potential to play that way. So you could go ahead and you could put Envoy alongside these three, and I think with the proper guidance and some time to really start to gel and mold into what that squad wants to do, I think Florida could absolutely compete. I don't know, again, one of the worst places to be continuously, like what you see in traditional sports, is kind of that middle of the pack squad. I think I think Florida, there is no shot whatsoever that they miss champs, but I don't know if this roster per se gets them like a top 2 or a top 3 seed. I don't know if that potential is there, but I do think Envoy in one of the other spots, as long as everything goes well, I do think that potential is there. So from here, if it just depends on, for me, where Envoy wants to go, right? Because let's say Envoy ends up going to LA Thieves. Well, then you have a seam that probably ends up sticking with NYSL. If you're Clay, I'm not sure that there's a better spot for Clay. And then a couple names that we haven't even really talked about. At least right now, my thought is that Crim probably moves on to do his own thing. Some people have said, well, what about Crim and Clay teaming up on NYSL? I think those two worked in 5v5 where you absolutely needed two main ARs. But if the next Call of Duty in 4v4, if Vanguard is a 3 SMG meta and Clay and Crim are together, it's a wrap, right? I don't think there's any way, it doesn't matter for me how much practice they put in. I'm not quite sure those two could exist in a 3 SMG meta. I think they have to be separate. So, and by the way, this also has people talking, right? What if Envoy goes here? And if it's a 2 SMG, 2 AR meta heading into Vanguard, this looks pretty darn solid, right? You have Hydra, you have Envoy as your 2 SMGs, you have Clay, you have Crim. 1,000%, this checks all of the boxes. This is a squad that could compete with basically anybody. The other name that we haven't quite said is if whoever brings up this other spot that would be available that's created by the merger from Optic and Dallas. We haven't talked about Vivid at all, so there's, I guess, a chance that Vivid and Crim stick together. Again, Vivid is not quite a BZ, but he does play that way. He's almost like a B tier, a BZ in a way. So you could also see him filling in one of these spots if Envoy doesn't end up going that way. So again, just to kind of break it all down, I think Envoy is going to end up making his decision. Then you're going to have names like Asim. You're going to have names like Vivid. We didn't talk about HUKE, but that's another possible name. I think those are probably the next three names that come off the board. And from there, you're going to have LAG filling out their roster, Seattle filling out their roster. Who knows what's going on with Paris? Apparently, their patent for their trademarks don't even exist anymore. They haven't existed since July. So who knows what's going on with Paris? But for me, it'll be super interesting to see what happens with Envoy and how the league continues to unfold once that move is made. So please, in the comments down below, let me know what you think. I think, at least from what I've gathered from previous videos, especially the Envoy video, is that you guys want to see Envoy, Hydra, CLAYSTER, and Crim together on NYSL. I think that would be a fantastic storyline. I'm just not quite sure it works in a 3 SMG meta. Tell me down in the comments, where do you think Envoy ends up? Is it with NYSL? Is it with LA Thieves? Does he pull something drastic and go to a different squad? Maybe LAG alongside who I think will probably be Pristini and Gunless. Either way, let me know in the comments below. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, as every single time we get a piece of news from the CDL, I'm going to be making a video and uploading it and making sure all of our bases are covered. So if you don't want to miss anything with Roster Mania, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave a like if you don't mind, as it always helps out the channel. Thank you guys so much. We will see you in the next video.